Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Addicts Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Mike and Nikki B. We are doing another episode of Why You Suck at Fantasy Football.
Because we know we all kind of suck.
Oh, no! We suck again!
You do until you watch this, and then you learn the error of your ways, and then you will be...
Suck a little bit less.
Winning.
Because why do we play, Nick?
You play to win the game.
All right, so we're just going to rush right into it. We did a little less prep for this one. We're going to shoot from the cuff.
Just going to be all drops for the intro.
We're just
all drops.
We're going nuts. I feel like I neglected it too much in the last episode.
It was a heavy drop section.
That's all right. I've had some requests. People love the drops.
We got there. All right, so Why You Suck Fantasy Football Auction Draft Edition. So...
explain what an auction draft is. Let's start.
An auction draft is, instead of a standard snake draft format where you draft 1 through 12 and then you go reverse order 12 through 1, so everybody gets a fair shot at all the players, you go with an auction draft. So auction means you have to bid a certain amount on a certain player to get them. You have to have the highest bid. So the more you want to spend on a player, the higher other people want to go on a certain player. You have to pay more, and it can get out of hand if you don't know what you're doing. And you can kind of, we say you can't win or lose a draft, or in the draft. This is a situation where I think you kind of can blow it.
I would agree. I think in the auction draft, if you spend $200 on Mitch Trubisky right away,
Big Mama's handing out biscuits, baby!
You're going to regret it. That's going to hurt your team.
I agree. I think you're going to regret that. I think it's just an interesting draft format. It's a draft you have to do research for, and there's not a whole lot of information online about auction drafts. I mean, if you want to go, how much should I spend on this player? Well, you have probably 2-3 sources to look for, and even those opinions are differing.
I completely agree. And my personal opinion is, just my personal experience. It's been a lot more difficult to find kind of a good breakdown. And then even sometimes you find it, if the league you're using, if they give you a $300 budget and the ones that they kind of gave, this guy should go for this much, and they use $200.
Right. The percentages are going to be.
Yeah. So if you're not a math guy, which that's not your
strong
particular strength. If you want to know about science, give me a call. But yeah, math.
I don't.
The science of fantasy football, but.
I think I like to approach an auction draft. My personal strategy is you got to get studs to perform during the season. When you only have, two running back positions, 2 wide receiver positions, you only have like 5, 6, 7, players that you're really drafting for your starting lineup. So I think you got to be aggressive early, but I don't think you can blow every cent you have on 3 or 4 players.
Well, that's the thing, is like you can go different routes.
Right.
You can
go bananas at the beginning.
Yeah, so you could just pick your 2 guys that you really want, and you could spend all your money on them, and you could have, Christian McCaffrey and, let's say Lamar Jackson or somebody like that, or, another stud. You could get Saquon and Christian. Conceivably, you could get both guys in an auction draft, where you won't be able to do that in a snake draft.
Right. Well, and then you come up to the end of the draft where the people that have been saving money this whole time start getting pretty good players.
Value.
You start seeing, Diggs come off the board for like $4. You're like, well, I would have paid $4 for Diggs, but I only have $1 and I have 5 spots to fill.
Bingo.
You feel good. Again, I think my personal experience, when you do, you get the much better value. I think where you lose value the most is on like the first couple studs that go off the board. People are just like, oh man, Christian McCaffrey, and you spend, let's say you have a $200 budget and you spend $100, it's really going to hamper you from getting depth on your team.
Right. Well, I think, if you're looking at, hey, why am I struggling? Why am I sucking at this? I think it can be that you don't have a plan. You're just spending on players and panic buying. Okay, Christian McCaffrey run off the board. Okay, Zeke went off. Saquon went off. All of a sudden you see, Kamara up there, and Kamara is going for more than Saquon was going for.
Because he's the last one of that tier.
Right, exactly. And you're panicking like, the next guy is so-and-so, is Derrick Henry, and I don't like Derrick Henry at all compared to Kamara, so I got to buy this. Well, you just spent the same amount you could have gotten Saquon or Zeke or those other guys for.
Yeah, and we talked about tier-based drafting in one of our other Why You Suck at Fantasy Football videos that you can still check out on YouTube. And one of the things is, I think you don't want to start the tier and you don't want to end the tier. You want to try and get it in the middle. So if you start the tier, you're probably paying high because everybody's like, oh, okay, this guy's, maybe the best guy in that tier. I really want that guy. But if it's at the end, the same thing kind of happens. Like if I don't get this guy, my running back's going to be, a B-level guy instead of an A-level guy. And I have to get this guy. So you have to overpay and maybe get in a bidding war with another guy who realizes like, ooh, if I don't get this guy, I'm going to be in trouble at running back.
Right. Yeah. No, I think I also don't mind being the first person to buy, to set the price, go strong early. Every year that we get into the auction draft, I try to put the player I want up first.
Wrong.
Don't like it.
Here's the thing. You can kind of gauge how the rest of the draft is going to go right then. If you're smart, you know how much the person's going to go for. Okay, I know the premium running back in our league is going to go for between $80 and $85. Like that's where our number 1 or number 2 ranked running back is going to go. I'll just start the bid at $80, and if it gets bid up to $90, I know that I need to wait and get those next tier running backs because these are going to be too expensive for what I want to plan out.
So I'll throw out a different strategy. I personally like to nominate because a lot of times in auction draft, it's like how the order of the players will go is that someone your turn will come up to nominate a player. You'll put up the player. You'll start out a bid, and then everyone else will get a chance to bid on that player. But I like to nominate players that I am not high on. So guys that I think will go for a lot, but that I personally don't like, so that hopefully people will use up a good chunk of their money before it gets to the guys that I like. So let's say last year personally I was out on Saquon Barkley, and I put him up as one of my first guys with a fairly high bid, knowing that it was early in the draft. He was a guy that a lot of people were high on, and I thought that would really get people to spend a lot of money. So first of all, they use up their money, but second of all, they have a position filled at running back. So now when another running back comes up, I won't have to battle that person because they have that spot filled.
Right, and I like that strategy in general, but you got to think, I've tried this year after year. You have 12 people you're bidding against. Okay, one running back comes out like off the board. You still have 10 other owners that you're bidding against. So if you want one of the top 4 running backs, it doesn't eliminate the market. There's still the market for that player.
60% of the time, it works every time.
I don't know that that's maybe 10% of the time it works every time on that.
Well, so for example, like I would nominate kickers, like high-end kickers, and you should never spend more than $1 for a kicker or a defense in an auction draft.
Right, and they'll go for $2 or $3.
Yeah, and they would, and so it might not sound like a lot, but you get into those last players, and what happens is everybody's out of money, and now you're just bidding $1 on players, and if anyone has $2, they can really have the pick of those low-level guys.
Right.
So if you've gotten people to use up $2 even on a kicker that they didn't need, it could make the difference between getting a guy like a late-round sleeper quarterback, like, again, a Lamar. If somebody had $11 at the time when I spent $10 on him, I might not have got that guy. It actually happened to me in our Dynasty League. Right. I think I bid $1. It was his rookie year. And Heath, who sometimes follows us on Twitch, outbid me by $1. And then I tried to trade for him still before the blow up, before he was the guy. And he wanted way too much at the time. And
or did he?
Because of Heath, who then dropped out of our league, I missed out on. I could have had Pat Mahomes and Lamar. And now I'm just sitting there with Mahomes and Big Ben.
Nobody else.
I feel all right about Big Ben.
We'll see.
He's a great backup for my team.
But yeah, I also think there's an issue where you don't want to have too much money and end the draft with money still in your pocket. I've seen people, start out a draft with $200 and then they finish with $30 left over. Like that's so much equity that you just didn't use.
You got all this money, and then all that's left out there is
Mozambique. Yeah,
exactly. You got David Montgomery, and you could have gotten Derrick Henry.
Yeah, and I think that so what I do, and this strategy is different than probably how Nick does because I'm not great with numbers, is I'll have like a couple of different types of budget. I'll have one where I take like a really high end up guy. I have another one where I take like 3 kind of next tier guys, but no like number 1 giant money guy. And in the draft, I'll kind of like, if I take one, I'll cross off and then add kind of or subtract from whatever I did to see, okay, how much I have left. And I can add maybe a couple down to my low-end guys, or maybe I could add 10 more to my second pick.
You can kind of move your budget around as you go.
So that's how I do it, just pencil and paper. And again, I'm sure there are fancier ways you could do it with a computer and things like that. But that's what I like to do personally. And again, I'm not great at math, but I can just do simple addition, subtraction quick enough that I can know, okay, now I can like if I spend 20 on this guy, I'm going to have to do 8 guys for $1. If I spend 10 on this guy, I can
Right.
make a $5 and a couple $2 and a $1, things like that.
Do you like to run up the bid on players?
Talk about Sony Michel and how you got Sony Michel in our league.
I don't want to talk about Sonny Michel. I don't want to talk about it.
Oh no!
Oh, that didn't work out.
Not up in here!
Yeah,
There's a risk.
Whammy!
Whammy. Are you saying pow? There's always a risk with bidding up players, right?
absolutely.
But I think it's a risk worth taking if you execute it correctly. I executed it incorrectly at the time. I went too high. You know you're going to go $1 over at the time. You're saying, okay, if I go one more $1, I know he's just not going to go over there. And you do it anyway, and sure enough, you're correct.
I remember when it happened. I felt pretty good about it.
It goes back to know your league. I thought he would bid more for the Patriot, and he wouldn't.
So, I think just a note about that is some of the players, like when you start them and you select them and you know they're going to go for a high amount, don't start them at $1. Start them at $40, $50.
Right. Don't be that guy in your draft that tries to start the bid at $1 or $2
for Christian McCaffrey. Like go ahead and
get
just
it
start
rolling.
it at like 60, 70 right away.
Go 80% of his value that you've seen. If he's been going for $60, pay started at 40.
Yeah. So
It'll
things
get
like
there.
that I will do sometimes. Is just kind of you roll
Your
your eyes,
league mates will
and you
thank
throw
you.
out like a pretty high value, but something that's
Right.
under what it would be,
Right.
just to get it up a little bit. Save that from everybody clicking $1 every time.
It's the worst.
But so if it's a guy I believe in and I like and I think would be good for my team once in a while, and especially if I feel like they're going like
Right.
way under value, then once in a while I'll put a couple extra dollar bids on it. But generally I try not to, just because you could get stuck with a guy. But if you're gonna run it up on a guy that you at least kind of like. Don't do it for a guy
Right.
that you have no faith in.
I think I have one final tip I'd like to go over, and that's
All right,
if you see a player going for way under what they should be going for,
maybe take the shot.
get in the action. Like I've seen, Thielen in our league the year that he went off. All the top 20 wide receivers were going for $40 or more.
60% of the time, it works every time.
And Thielen went for like 27. He was ranked up there, and by that time in the draft, just after middle point of the draft, he came up there as a kind of forgotten name. Nobody had money left, and he just went. Just take the purchase. At least try to purchase at that discounted rate. If it keeps going up and back to the normal price, then obviously just let it go. But even if it's not part of your draft plan, if you see a player that you like get into a price range that you're surprised by, don't be afraid to purchase or at least put a bid in.
Yeah, and I personally feel like don't undervalue those mid to late round guys, because you
For
can
sure.
find some real good value.
Definitely save some money.
And you can get guys that, again, I think that you wouldn't be able to build your team the same way if you were to do a snake draft,
Right.
because, again, you could build a team where you're taking a lot of middle round guys with no stud, whereas the other teams, if you do a snake draft, you're going to have a top end guy, and then in descending order where you can group them a lot differently.
So if you're talking, let's say you have $200 for your draft, right? By the middle point in the draft, how much money would you expect to have left?
I think that you're going to have maybe a quarter of your money.
Yeah,
Tell me what you think.
I would say, I think by the midway point in the draft, maybe just a little after, I'd be expecting to spend at least 80% of my money. If I only have bench spots and kicker defense to pick up, I don't want more than, probably 10 to 15% of my budget.
Yeah. I think, again, it's different, though, because just the way that things go. Sometimes there'll be guys that go for low. I think Heath got Russell Wilson for $11, and he just his
We never
favorite
heard the
thing
end of that.
ever,
We never heard
as
the
the
end.
highlight of his fantasy football career. But so there will be guys that people don't believe in, and there'll be guys sometimes that, I'd be curious in an auction draft this year what Juju Smith-Schuster, how much people would it get run up?
Right.
And I think if he was the last guy kind of in a tier, it could get run up. If he got selected early and people are just kind of like,
Right.
I got money, let's spend it.
Yeah.
So you got to prepare.
Don't forget to bring a towel.
And finally, what do you prefer? Dynasty or snake draft or auction format? Do you have a preference?
I always feel better prepared for snake draft. It's
Right.
easier to find mocks for snake draft also. So that we just did an episode that we're going to release about doing mock drafts to practice for drafts, and it is more difficult to find good auction drafts, especially again set to exact dollar amount that you're doing. I think they have it in the premium version of Fantasy Pros, but as of now, I don't believe you can do it on Yahoo or Sleeper.
I much prefer an auction draft. It's especially if you have league tacos that just don't prepare and aren't sure of what's going on. Haven't done any background research. You can find some really good deals and kind of just take advantage of the situation.
Well, you got to do more than that.
Exactly. So, especially in the leagues I play in, we'll have probably half the guys paying very good attention to league news and NFL news and whatnot. The other guys don't and won't put in the research to see how, like you were saying before, how much players are going for, what the tier breaks are. It's stuff that you kind of need to know. You got to prepare more for an auction draft than you do for a snake.
Yeah, I think so. And again, there's just more variance. Even if you, let's say you did no preparation, like you can auto draft a snake draft and get a team that like you can probably, if you had a good owner, they can take it and they can make it into something.
Right.
You can't do that with an auction draft.
You can't. You need all 12 players or 12 owners to be, or 10. Or
they got to be there. Involved. Again, there's not a good way to do an auto draft for it.
Right. The last thing that I like about it is you can always get the player you want. You may have to spend
until you spend all of it on one guy, and then you don't have any money for the rest of your guys.
Right.
See, I've disagreed. I've heard you say this before, and it's like one guy, yes, but then you're limited to that guy.
But if you're buying in on a guy or two, you can purchase them. In a snake draft, if you want Christian McCaffrey and you're the 5th pick, there's no situation where you're getting Christian McCaffrey unless you trade for him.
Yeah.
Like, you just can't. In an auction draft, you can spend whatever you have to spend to get a player. I like that. I prefer it.
It's interesting to do. I'm glad that I've done it, but as far as, again, I think it's just also you got to know that your players. If you're playing in a league with guys that are paying attention, they're on the ball. But if you're not, if you're just doing if you're new to fantasy football, if you're just got a league where there's people that are less, experienced, less interested, I think then you're going to want to probably stick to the snake draft.
Yeah, I think it's slightly more advanced than the snake, and you'll definitely.
It's fun. It's cool. It's
for sure.
It's great if you can get everybody together. There's another element of an auction.
I switched my league, like I said, that has 4 or 5 teams that aren't super active, and they still figured it out. They were still.
That's pretty neat.
And Greg, your brother who won, had zero experience playing auction.
Actually, I believe he got second place.
Did you?
And I won.
Did you
in a championship game against my brother Greg? It was great.
You play to win the game.
We're gonna hear about that forever.
It was a good day. Yeah.
All right, you want to wrap us up?
To be fair, one last note about that. I did. And we might do a Why You Suck at Fantasy Football edition of tanking. I did have to tank the year before to have a massive budget that I did take into auction. So if you have auction too, to have that extra money, if the year before you were able to make some trades for budget,
right?
That is also something that is that's why I was able to win that league. Is I think because it was an auction that really helped me out with the tank and rebuild
for sure. Well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like. Thank you.
Yep.